part two of I just got interrupted to part two of IBEC, the 10-minute presentation. My name is Ruth Kraft. I'm the Uber judge of this segment. In real life, I'm a partner in a New York law firm. And before that, I was a real life judge in New York State and a law professor at New York University. So it's my pleasure to welcome you. This morning, we have teams from Fordham University, the United States Military Academy at West Point, and Manitoba, a little bit farther afield, Team 2. So let me read the instructions to you, and then I will have the other judges who are on the panel introduce themselves to you. Okay, so now having made a substantial presentation yesterday, including feedback that was close to an hour long, you have now been called back to the company to which you gave your full presentation for round 2. And they've asked you to focus today only on the ethical aspects of the problem and to explain why your solution successfully addresses those ethical issues. And you will have 10 minutes. There will be no Q&A. You may not use slides or video. You probably don't want to have more than 2 or 3 members of your team do this. I was also advised to tell you to please look into the camera. And I know from making videos that that's not easy if you are on an iPad or a device that has a camera at the corner. And we know that this year everybody is a little technologically challenged, hopefully next year in Cambridge. So I'm going to ask the judges to please introduce themselves.
I'll go first. Fred Kipperman. I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm a lawyer, insurance broker, investor, and a big fan of Tom, and think this is a really important aspect of leadership development, and excited to participate.
And you are up very early in the morning, sir.
Good. Yeah, well, we just finished our family calisthenics and I'm ready.
I think we could have the Military Academy people challenge you to a run. Okay, and who else is here? Ryan?
Thank you, Ruth. My name is Ryan Corella. I did no calisthenics beforehand because I'm definitely not that kind of morning person, but kudos to Mr. Kipperman, who is. I'm based down in Miami, Florida. I'm an attorney in private practice. I provide transactional legal services to clients in the entertainment and education industry. I also have a couple higher education clients. I'm the general counsel for Doral College, which is a small college down in South Florida, and I'll have a faculty appointment there. I also teach at the University of Miami School of Business, which I think is now called the Herbert Business School. In both of those faculty roles, I teach business law and ethics, and I've been involved in IBEC in different ways for almost a decade now. I've been a coach, I've been a judge. I think it's a really rewarding and valuable co-curricular activity to be involved with. And so it's great to see so many excellent students who have chosen to get involved with it as well.
That's terrific. Anyone else? Because some of our judges look as young as our students.
Yes, good morning. My name is Samantha Nordstrom. I'm a project manager for FICC at DTCC, and I help facilitate the trades of mortgage-backed securities and government-backed securities to mitigate risk within financial markets. I've done IBEC for about 2 years now. I'm a competitor turned judge, and I'm very excited to see what we have this morning.
Yeah, that is the neat thing. I've been involved for 21 years, and we have individuals who coach teams returning as judges in retirement often. And the biggest joy, I think, is when you see people who've competed in the IBEC come back as judges, you know, and stayed involved in business ethics. So it is now 8:50 a.m. and we are going to begin with Fordham University.
Would you like us to just begin or
Yes,
introduce ourselves?
please. Yes, well, you can introduce yourselves and make your presentation. So tell us who you are, and you want to tell us who we are as well.
Okay. My name is Melina Au. I am a freshman in the Gabelli School of Business, pursuing a degree in marketing. I am joined by my teammate.
I'm Jacqueline Emanuel. I'm also a freshman in the Gabelli School of Business, pursuing a degree in mathematics and finance.
We will be acting as a consulting group, and the judges will be the board members to major food industry companies. Are we ready to begin? Okay. Executive board members, are you aware of the severity or extent that sugar influences obesity, diabetes, and heart health? Based on a study conducted by Johns Hopkins Medicine, in 1962, 46% of adults in the US were considered overweight or obese. By 2010, that figure jumped up to 75%. While sugar is not the only cause of this increased health risk, health advisors have pointed to sugar to be the main factor of this jump. But while Gen Z, the main consumer targets for the current food industry, holds values in mindful eating, calorie counting, and sustainable and environmentally friendly food practices, deceptive advertising techniques prevent people from knowing what they are actually putting into their bodies. We argue that once consumers recognize their unhealthy eating habits due to misguided information and poor sustainability promises, which they will find out quickly due to the easy distribution of information via social media, brand reputation will likely fall, thus resulting in lower profitability. The same, if not more, goes for the greenwashing and false statements of operating under environmentally friendly practices or fighting against pollution and climate change. As a result, when food companies promote products with high nutritional value and or that they operate under sustainable and environmentally friendly practices, it is in their best interests to maintain these promises.
In response to these ethical concerns with current marketing approaches, we propose a shift towards a more sustainable and transparent approach, inbound marketing and reputable branding. Inbound marketing is a newer model of marketing based on attracting customers through valuable content. This content can range from making videos to anything that increases interactions between the brand and the consumers. The goal is to build trust and credibility while fulfilling consumers' needs and desires. To prove the practicality of this approach, some significant statistics about inbound marketing are that it generates up to 126% more leads and costs 60% less than outbound methods. Especially in a world that is rapidly moving in a social media-based direction, this approach can ensure that companies stay ahead of trends while also fulfilling their ethical duty to their consumers. As Gen Z floods the markets, both as employees and as consumers, their commitment to sustainability, both in lifestyle and for the planet, will hurt companies that refuse to preemptively address the ethical issues that they have. An inbound marketing approach will ensure that companies establish themselves as a reputable brand and gain the support of a new generation. In addition to the potential positive impacts on the brand itself, there are significant ethical reasons for why this solution should be implemented. We have decided to separate our ethical reasoning into two main categories: consequentialism and the idea that an action is good if its effects are good, and the idea of moral obligation. Beginning with consequentialism, we believe that the overall effects of misleading marketing alone serve as ethical reasoning for why companies should focus on ethical marketing techniques. Misleading marketing can have significant negative impacts on consumers and on the environment. In terms of health effects on the population, misleading marketing in the implied health benefits on a product, as seen in a popular chocolate hazelnut spread as Nutella, as well as in serving sizes evidenced by the butter sprays like Pam, can lead to the significant overconsumption of certain unhealthy sugars and fats. Overconsumption of these substances has been proven to cause increased risk for cardiovascular disease, increased blood pressure and inflammation, and a higher risk of long-term sugar addiction and continued overconsumption. Additionally, especially in products like Nutella, which is marketed directly towards children, these health concerns become even more severe, specifically in childhood sugar overconsumption, which has been shown to lead to fatty liver disease, early onset childhood diabetes, heart disease, and perhaps most importantly, has been linked to a negative impact on academic performance, as the spike from sugar early in the day can lead to crashes during critical schooling hours. In terms of harming the environment, greenwashing suggests that a company is more sustainable than it is, which means that consumers are more willing to continue to buy large quantities of a product as they are unaware of the effects that their actions can have on the environment. In the long term, this could have detrimental effects on the environment. Pollution is, as we all know, a significant issue and the cause of many other problems for the planet and the human race. If, for example, people do not boycott or hold companies accountable for their part in pollution because they believe, as they have stated in their advertisements and their packaging, that they have changed their practices to reduce their carbon footprint and help the fight against pollution, they will continue to purchase these products, believing that they are supporting the fight against plastics. However, the amount of pollution being caused will stay the same and could cause serious environmental issues in the future, unbeknownst to the consumers. In this way, the negative long-term effects and consequences of the techniques on both the planet and the population are reason enough to call for an end to misleading marketing.
Melina, you're muted.
Majority
No
of food
worries.
brands have a mission and value statement or promise to operate under a code of ethics. Let's consider the mission and value statements by Nutella and Starbucks. Nutella claims to operate under core values of loyalty, trust, respect, responsibility, and integrity. And Starbucks' code of ethics supports being present, connecting with transparency, dignity, and respect. Despite these claims, Nutella advertises their chocolate hazelnut spread as a tasty yet balanced breakfast food, when the sugar and palm oil concentrations greatly outweigh the hazelnut and cocoa content. For reference, Nutella's top 3 ingredients are 58% sugar, 25% palm oil, and only 8% hazelnuts, a significant difference in the ingredient content for products promoted as a chocolate hazelnut spread. As for Starbucks, they switched to a strawless lid when reusable straws and paper straws became more popular with the Gen Z audience. However, these strawless lids contained more plastic than the original straw and lid combination, and the Starbucks lacked efforts in encouraging their consumers to recycle these same plastic containers. As a result, most of these sustainable programs and strawless cups get sent straight to the landfills, not improving the already low, about less than 9% of recyclable materials in the world that are actually being recycled. As demonstrated, these food brands that fail to abide by these code of ethics that they claim to operate by, this breaks their consumer trust, fails to be transparent, and they are not being ethically responsible for the impacts in people's lives and the world. As corporate agents, that have a health impact in people's lives, they have a moral obligation to operate ethically, and they should be held accountable to uphold their ethical claims. While the deceptive advertising techniques, as seen in Nutella's inaccurate nutritional profile impressions and Starbucks greenwashing concerns, this may result in greater profits and unit sales in the short run, but it is morally and ethically wrong to misguide their consumers about the nutritional value of their products. In the long run, this misinformation can cause health effects and harm to the consumers, destroy the brand reputation, or their trust in the food company's overall products and practices.
In summary, implementing an inbound marketing strategy will not only benefit the company in the long run, but it will also ensure that they fulfill their ethical duty to their consumers. In using this approach, companies will increase their transparency, attracting both consumers and employees from the younger generation. These companies will make their brands more reputable, leading to more customer loyalty and longevity. Additionally, this implementation will aid in ensuring the sound and successful education of future generations by decreasing risks of childhood overconsumption, improving the overall health effect of the country, and bolstering the fight against pollution. The positive long-term impacts on the business, the potential long-term health benefits, as well as the responsibility to uphold ethical standards are what make implementing inbound marketing and other ethical marketing practices not just a suggested approach, but rather a duty. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me get back to our main screen here. Okay. And we are up to the United States Military Academy. And I see Vivian is there. Vivian, do you have another? Oh, two of you on one screen. We've got a twofer. Okay. I was kind of wondering.
Yeah.
All right. And I just want to remind all of you that the feedback to all three of these presentations will come at the conclusion of the third one from the University of Manitoba. So are you ready to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Okay. So we can begin. It is now 9:02 a.m.
So you all will be representing the board of WISA, which is a large credit card company that also offers kind of e-services with financial transfers. And so I'm Jacob Foster. I will be our Chief Strategy Officer.
And I'm Vivian Chai. I will be our Chief Risk Officer.
And so you all, as the board, were kind enough to invite us back to kind of deepen our explanation of some of the ethical elements of our brief yesterday.
So today we'll really be breaking down what exactly our recommendation is again, why we recommend it, especially focusing on the ethics behind our recommendation, and then we'll briefly conclude, just wrapping up our final thoughts regarding the situation. So our recommendation for you all today is we really believe that our financial company should stay in Russia to continue providing that critical financial support that's required to Russian citizens, while also ensuring that we're not indirectly aiding the Russian conflict in any way, all while acting in accordance to current and ongoing United States sanctions and laws, especially as they continue to be amended or adjudicated based on the changes that occur within the Russian conflict. And we really came to this conclusion because we value supporting communities. We believe that we have a social responsibility, and we also value collaboration. And all three of these funnel into our mission statement, which is to empower financial freedom for our consumers. And we really prioritize our customers regardless of where they are. And so we want to ensure that as international and global conflicts arise, that our values and our mission statement still remains the same, and that we are constantly helping and aiding those who need it in any way that we are able to.
So speaking just a little bit more to some of the kind of ethical concerns we have about the relatively unprecedented nature of what we're confronting, we would like to point out that there's a kind of new amount of ethical, moral hazard that's going to be present in doing business in Russia since the invasion of Ukraine. But we'd like to emphasize that this is a little bit of a difference more in scale than in kind, and that a lot of those hazards have been a part of doing business internationally since time immemorial, even in Russia in particular, since 2014, when Russia first invaded Ukraine. There's been a lot of challenges with needing to take greater measures than normal to avoid providing financial services to people who were directly involved in the invasion of Ukraine, or supporting what were universally seen as illegal, or nearly universally seen as illegal or immoral actions in the Donbass or in Crimea itself. And so before we speak to a little bit more of our social responsibility more broadly, we just want to contextualize the unprecedented nature of the invasion of Ukraine as part of a broader pattern of the challenges of doing business to support people, many of whom are in desperate need of financial resources and our services around the world, even as countries have been taking steps that we see as immoral and have no interest in supporting financially or otherwise. And we believe it would be unethical to support financially or otherwise for decades now.
When we think of the effect that pulling out of Russia would have on Russian citizens, we have to keep in mind, for example, that these sanctions are not just creating negative consequences for the Russian government, but it's also directly affecting everyone within Russia. And so what would have been sufficient enough for Russian citizens to pay for just food, housing, and those daily necessities is no longer possible with the same level of income as sanctions continue to increase the cost of living within Russia. And so a lot of Russian citizens heavily depend on the credit that they have already and the little access that they have to the monetary funds, as well as the credit that we're able to provide for them. And so when we're looking at, for example, Frida Rustamova, who's a Russian journalist, she didn't have a foreign bank account set up in time. And so when all these companies started withdrawing from Russia, she had to quickly withdraw as much cash as she could while also trying to leave Russia. And so those citizens that are still in Russia and unable to leave, as Russia continues to regulate how many citizens are able to leave, especially accounting for their debt, we're really trying to ensure that they have the ability to continue to pay for those daily necessities.
So when we extrapolate from our company's mission statement and evaluate kind of the ethical obligations we've taken upon ourselves, we think it's important to recognize that there are broad parameters around what we can do ethically. So we think it is vital that we don't endanger any of our employees. So one of the challenges we've now come to confront is, for example, with the recent disappearance of a Wall Street Journal reporter in Russia, or recent deaths among Russian business elite, we need to recognize that there are actually new hazards independent of the politics of the conflict that are going to affect any employees we have working there, and need to recognize that as a fundamental parameter. And while our assessment is currently it is possible to continue doing business in Russia without endangering employees, we do in our recommendation call for taking measures to reduce the number of people who are going there, increase remote work, and disentangle the Kiev and Moscow offices. But there are kind of other fundamental parameters that need to limit, whose limits guided our proposal, which is needing to avoid any appearance of directly supporting financially or otherwise the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So that meant not only complying with American sanctions regime to the fullest extent, so not taking any measures that could be seen as circumventing it or continuing to do business in other ways by individuals listed on it, not doing business with intermediaries of theirs, avoiding entire sectors of the Russian economy that are under sanction, and even taking measures beyond what is required by law, because we believe it is ethically necessary to avoid entangling ourselves in any way with supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so that would entail doing stuff like using normal civilian measures we have to evaluate people's credit, confirm they are who they say and stuff like that, to avoid financing people who we think or suspect might be using the funds to, say, purchase additional equipment for Russian soldiers in Ukraine, or serve as intermediaries for people who would otherwise be unable to get credit from us. But within these broad parameters, which we think are really important to adhere to in order to make sure that our solution is actually ethical, we need to recognize that we ought to be judging the decision off of the foreseeable consequences it would have. And so, as my partner was earlier alluding to, the ultimate consequences of withdrawing from Russia in its entirety could be catastrophic, and that those consequences would disproportionately impact the most vulnerable. Russia already has some of the largest foreign currency reserves in the world and has been able to weather Western sanctions surprisingly well. But those financial resources are almost exclusively available to people who are already connected to the government in some way, and are certainly not available to those who are questioning the government, resisting in key ways, trying to flee the country, issues like that. And so that part of doing business in Russia is recognizing that, well, if we were to totally withdraw from Russia, we wouldn't actually impede the ability of the Russian state to, say, raise taxes to fund its war, but we would have a lot of harm on individual citizens within Russia who are either just trying to get by, and that a lot of the harms we would be inflicting upon the Russian people would disproportionately be accruing to the people who are most vulnerable to the Russian state, or have already been suppressed by it financially or politically.
Yeah.
So if we are just to go over in thinking about this outcome as the total consequences of if we broke into two worlds, one where we took the steps of companies like our competitor Visa and withdrew totally from Russia, or one where we stayed, we need to recognize that by virtue of staying, we're continuing to provide vital financial services to people who really need them, especially people who are already at risk of further exploitation by the Russian state. And that while it is vital that we take pains that we're already taking and measures that we can strengthen further to avoid directly supporting Russia's war and invasion of Ukraine, that doesn't mean we need to leave the country entirely and leave every Russian without financial options that we offer. Furthermore, we need to recognize that if we're looking at the option of staying, not only are we offering these vital financial resources to people writ large, but it can often be a tool for people who don't want to be held under the thumb of the regime, who want to flee, to avoid the draft, tools like that. And ultimately, the difference between these two worlds, even though the visuals and optics of withdrawing from Russia entirely may seem like it is offering more support to the Ukrainian people, we worry it would ultimately be reinforcing some of the most baseless and harmful claims that the Putin regime has made, which is arguing that by virtue of invading Ukraine, they're fighting against the whole West, and the whole West is out to destroy Russia. We worry that we would be legitimizing those claims if we were to withdraw totally. So do you want to share a conclusion?
Right. So our broader recommendation is really just to do as little harm to those that we believe are most vulnerable, without aiding those actually doing the harm, while staying within the bounds of our country's laws and sanctions. And so that really boils down to staying in Russia to help provide support for Russian citizens. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vivian and Jake. Okay, let me go back to this view. All right. And so we are up to the University of Manitoba. And I think you're going to need to unmute.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? I think
Yeah.
the easiest way to do it is if we have one microphone on and two cameras. That's all good?
Absolutely.
And
But
just a
you're
question about the-
very clear right now.
Excellent. And just a question about the timing. When does our timer start? When we start speaking, when we get into
Yes.
character? Okay. Would you like us to introduce ourselves?
I would say that
Before?
I've counted the time that you've introduced yourselves and stated who you are in character as part of the time. Nobody's gone over at this point. So we're okay. And we are at approximately 9:13 a.m. and you can begin.
We are good to go.
Yes, absolutely.
Good morning, Union Pacific's Board of Directors. I'm Taya, and this is my colleague Garrison. We are Optimist Consulting from the Asper School of Business. Thank you for having us back to reiterate our ethical concerns and further emphasize the importance of our recommendation. We appreciate your eagerness to understand our ethical concerns surrounding Union Pacific. We will first begin by expanding upon our ethical dimensions from our presentation yesterday, explaining the root of the issue, and explaining how our recommendation will tackle these challenges to make Union Pacific as ethically focused as it can be. Plainly speaking, good ethics requires the consideration of the impact on others, and many of UP's impacts are negative. Currently, when derailments happen, Union Pacific is prioritizing its financial bottom line over ethical considerations. Derailment responses are seen as how many workers, members of the community, and the general public we need to compensate, rather than creating a support system for those affected. We want to change this mindset to make UP more ethically focused by preventing or mitigating the impacts of the accidents, which also helps to reduce cost, changing the company culture, and improving the response when an accident does happen, all working to achieve UP's stated ethical purpose by fixing its current issues.
To extend what Taya said, I'd like to discuss your own mission statement, as we will discuss how your current business practices are not aligned with your mission and how our recommendations can help you get there. Your mission statement is to build America for all generations by connecting our nation's businesses and communities to each other in the world. And to credit you, throughout your history, you've done just that. Railroads were a pivotal industry in the foundation of America, and since 1862, your company has helped build the country we all love. However, as we move into a world more concerned with ethical behavior, we recommend you make changes to your company culture that will make you the envy of the industry and truly set you up to serve generations to come.
We want to fix your position on the ethical spectrum to be more aligned with your mission, moving from operating from a legalistic standpoint, simply obeying the law with no policies above that, to operating to an ethical standpoint, where Union Pacific integrates ethical practices into the core of your business. The recommendations we will outline do just this, helping to create a more ethics-focused work environment to better the lives of your employees as well as other stakeholders. The first 3 ethical points we want to address is the mental and physical health of your employees. Workers for UP feel immense existential anxiety from the danger derailments pose both to themselves and others. As it stands, even if they know there's a high chance of derailment, they may not be able to do anything about it. This creates a feeling of helplessness that is not conducive to a satisfactory work environment. The relationship between employee and employer is not as strong as it could be, and there is no trust built up, no programs established to show that you care about them. All of this can be detrimental to their relationship with Union Pacific and their quality of life outside of the workplace.
There's no single solution to bettering the physical and mental health of your workers, but there are absolutely steps that can be taken to help them. For starters, we recommend relieving some of the stress that they feel due to their perceived personal responsibility for derailments. This can be done by allowing and encouraging them to take action when they feel there's something wrong with the areas that they observe. With our recommendation, workers are given the power to halt trains when there is a derailment risk. This helps to ensure that they understand their priority is safety, not efficiency.
The best way to show employees that you're serious about making changes is to offer incentives for them to do the same. To improve employee morale, we suggest you implement programs that show how much you value them, as well as show them you're committed to changing company priorities. To show appreciation for the work they do, we recommend an optional company stock program. This would not only benefit employees financially, but inspire pride in their employment, as they are now partly owners as well as employees. Share prices are expected to increase after a recommendation is implemented, and having a stake in the company, if they should choose to take part, creates a desire for the company to prosper. As a result, workers are projected to work more productively and have a better probability of remaining within the company, reducing employee turnover. We also want to make sure employees are rewarded for their detection of unsafe work practices. A $10,000 salary bonus for rail yards with the lowest amount of incidents and injuries would do just that. These plans would show that your commitment to ethics is genuine, something incredibly important in winning the trust of your employees.
And it's obvious how these programs benefit the employees, but how do they benefit the company is what you understandably might be asking. We want to put a really strong emphasis on changing the internal culture because we understand why you have encouraged efficiency in the past. Efficiency is a great thing, but efficiency becomes even more admirable when it's achieved while valuing the concerns of others. This culture change allows Union Pacific to not only achieve efficiency, but also gives you the potential to flirt with corporate greatness. There's a very strong chance that our plan would make Union Pacific more efficient. With employees worried less about being powerless to stop a derailment, they're able to focus more on doing their job well. This will also raise general employee satisfaction, something Union Pacific has begun to score quite poorly in. For these reasons, the costs incurred in changing company culture will be negligible compared to the benefits.
Another symptom of the ethics issue facing Union Pacific is the disruption to communities that derailments have. The physical health of residents is put at risk as a result of the hazardous materials that have spilled from the train. Residents also have constant anxiety over the possibility of being evacuated from their homes, and they worry that they will not be properly compensated for damages that we have caused. This can have severe psychological effects that are nearly impossible to quantify in these communities. The fear railway communities have of train derailment is generated by their cognizance that currently Union Pacific prioritizes finance over families. We suggest that Union Pacific tries to change this. For if there are generations who fear living near a railway, your mission statement becomes harder to uphold.
There are relatively simple ways to ease the fears of those in railway communities. The first is the most obvious, preventing derailments. To do this, we recommend installing acoustic bearing detectors and broken track detectors to the rail. We understand that this may be expensive and slow to roll out. However, these expenses are made up for by knowing that this is a step towards shifting company priorities and becoming more ethical. Additionally, our calculations suggest it will actually pay off over time as fewer derailments mean fewer lawsuits, something that cost Union Pacific $2.7 billion in 2022.
In addition to prevention, Union Pacific should improve their response when an accident does happen. Our plan outlines 3 major steps in doing so. The first is to immediately give families displaced a lump sum of money so they don't have to pay for hotels and food out of pocket. The second is the most obvious: pay everyone affected a fair settlement. Finally, offer a sum of money to local small businesses affected by the derailment so that life can continue as normal when the cleanup is finished.
We also implore you to be very public about this response and let the communities know that you will take care of them in the event of a derailment. This will engender trust between you and the inhabitants of railway towns, reducing their stress and improving their quality of life. We understand that there's a large cost incurred to implement this strategy, but it is essential if you are to repair the damaged relationship between Union Pacific and railway communities.
The final key indicator of the ethical issue arises when UP prioritizes financials over safe transportation is the release of toxic chemicals when derailments do happen. These chemicals pose a threat to your workers and the community, as well as the environment. There have been countless instances of hazardous materials damaging ecosystems, polluting waterways, and contributing to air pollution. It is the responsibility of transportation companies, and in this case, specifically Union Pacific, to clean up their mess and repair the damage when the mispractice has harmed the environment in these detrimental ways, considering the long-term consequences of their actions and their environmental impact. Quite often, the water contaminated is the only source of water for these already disrupted communities, and these side effects of spillage only add fuel to the fire.
As I mentioned before, technology can be put in place to help reduce derailments. This includes derailments that harm the environment. However, it's important to understand that these accidents may still happen. And to limit the impact on the environment, we recommend you change the number of buffer cars you place between cars carrying hazardous materials from 1 to 5. There's no incurred cost to you is because the onus is on the shippers to make their payloads follow your regulations when using your tracks. This will be beneficial to all stakeholders because reducing the size of spills reduces harm to the environment and cleanup costs for Union Pacific.
While these ethical symptoms may seem pessimistic and hard to picture, a look around the industry just shows how real they are. Just last month, the Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine was the result of a push for profits that compromised safety. This derailment could have been prevented if the detectors we mentioned were in place to discover the issue before it was too late to take action. The finance first philosophy is clearly deeply ingrained in the industry. However, Union Pacific is in a position to change that. From your workers having more trust in the company and feeling valued, to the disrupted communities building a positive relationship with Union Pacific because they know they are being considered and taken care of, and methods to prevent environmental damage through imposing more derailment detection methods is one small step for you, but has a massive impact for your stakeholders in terms of the benefits that they reap. Human lives cannot simply be placed on a balance sheet when thinking ethically, and we are here primarily to encourage you to adopt that sentiment into everyday practices.
The business world rewards trendsetters and punishes those who neglect progress. The beauty of your position at Union Pacific is that your risks in shifting philosophies are so small, they're barely risks at all. If you seize the opportunity you have to change the railway industry, history will remember you favorably and you will eventually be rewarded in your bottom line. If you hesitate, the competition may do it first, forcing you to play catch up in an ultra-competitive industry. This recommendation puts you well on your way to achieving your mission of connecting future generations by ensuring that future generations of communities trust you to connect them. A stronger emphasis on safety measures and ethical behavior over the prioritization of the financial bottom line means Union Pacific is poised to dominate for decades to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to the big screen here. Okay, and this is the point at which the judges give their feedback. Ryan, do you have any comments?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much, Ruth. Wow, really terrific presentations across the board. In my opinion, in 10 years of doing this, I would say that in a lot of ways, the 10-minute presentation poses more difficulty than even the 25-minute presentation. We would think 25 minutes longer, more difficult, but when you have the benefit of a visual aid with the 25 minutes, you get to spread the workload across 5 people with the 25-minute. 10 minutes, it's just you and talking. And so the fact that, your teammates trusted in you to handle this is a testament to your skill. And I think you all did a wonderful job with it. Just some global notes for the group that I think are worth noting. Since you don't have a PowerPoint or a Prezi or some kind of visual aid to help you organize your thoughts, it becomes all the more critical for all of you in your presentation to be sort of a verbal PowerPoint for the listener. And so you have to take extra time to organize your thoughts to us so that those of us who don't know your content can follow along. And often a strategy that that I teach to students who do IBEC is, to break your 10-minute down into 3 steps. 1, tell them where you're going to take them. 2, take them there. 3, tell them where you just took them. The first step, take them there. Dedicate those first 2 minutes to let us know what your 3 or 4 major points are. Tell us on the front end what you're going to tell us and what the steps are so that we know how to follow along. And then when you get to step 2, which is take them there, where you give them the body of your presentation, go from one point to the next. And when you move from point 1 to point 2, tell us that you're doing that. Use a transitional phrase. Well, now that we've discussed our first point, we're now going to move to our second point, as we discussed, so that we can follow along and we have a better understanding of what's going on. Like, you guys know where you're going because you've prepped this 1,000 times. You have your outline written out. But for those of us who are just kind of depending on your words, getting that sort of verbal roadmap is helpful. Then finally, tell us where you just took us. Give us a closing, summarize the points so that if we missed anything along the way, you're going to catch us up. Another general performance note, which I think would apply to all three teams: slow down. This is very high level, highly technical subject matter that you're talking about, whether it's, the geopolitics of the Russia-Ukraine war or the particularities of, locomotive engineering. This is complicated subject matter. You got to slow it down for us. You have to, you're nervous, you're excited, you want to get through everything. You want to make sure you get it all in 10 minutes, but you got to give our feeble brains time to process this subject matter. Take it nice and slow. Even if it means you don't get to every piece of content, it's better to say fewer things more slowly and efficiently and effectively than to just try to cram in as many words as possible. I think that's, very, very, very important. And finally, when you're giving this presentation, remember that your audience is the business people, your colleagues at the company. And so that should affect the tone that you have. Try to stick with something conversational. We want to feel like you're talking to us and not talking at us. I think your impulse is going to be to treat this like a TED Talk or like a speech in front of thousands of people. And when we feel like we're being lectured, the brain has a tendency to tune out. Just, talk to us like it's regular subject matter. I think if you have your script sort of outlined or even written out, you're going to be more vulnerable to this problem. Whereas, if you just kind of explain things to us like you're having a conversation with your friend, ultimately your subject matter is going to be more effective. This certainly applies to Fordham and West Point, the idea of keeping your thoughts organized. Let us know on the front end what the main ethical issue is. Don't leave us guessing. That's very, very important. I think West Point did a nice job towards the end of sort of talking about how the main crux of the question was, do we stay? Do we go? How much of a presence do we have? That was valuable. Would have loved to even hear more of that up front. Manitoba, I think there's a lot of strengths in your presentation. You had a strong opener. You let us know what the issue was on the front end. You kind of walked us through each of the separate ethical issues. I like that. Another thing that you did, which I thought was very strong, and we try to encourage this with other teams when they do their 10-minute presentation, is to try to pass the ball around, right? Your first impulse when you're doing a presentation with two people is, all right, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, then you talk for 5 minutes, and we're done. And sometimes it's good to break up the speakers so that we, kind of get a fresh mind. So you guys, you never let more than about 90 seconds or 2 minutes go by before somebody else talked. And it was a nice signal to us to know, okay, now they've moved on to a new subject matter because there's a new speaker. That's generally a good approach. The more that you can pass the ball between your teammates and make it feel like a conversation as opposed to a lecture, that's ultimately going to be an effective way to present. And I thought you all did a nice job with that. Overall, all three groups, very, very impressed. I have a lot of optimism for the future of business ethics if you all are emblematic of the next generation's attitude towards it. Nice job.
Samantha, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I echo a lot of Ryan's comments. I love how cohesive the teams were. The chemistry was very engaging. I found myself very excited when every speaker would transition from point to point. I also would like to compliment you guys on how not only did you focus on your ethical issue within your company, but you also were able to use a foil on real world examples. I really liked the comparison for Nutella. I loved the 2 billion stat. And I really, really liked how we brought in the real world train derailment and how it could be prevented within your ethical model. I thought this was a very strong part of your presentation. I also really like the speaking skills in general. There are very few vocal fillers that I saw. Voices were strong. The pacing was kind of fast. I understand people are excited, but it was still very engaging. And I thought that the way that the information was presented for the most part was very, very clear. And the other comment of Ryan's I really want to emphasize as well was the problem was defined throughout the presentation. I found myself at some points guessing what ethical dimensions the problem might be taking. So as it became clear at the very end, it became much stronger. So I appreciate Ryan's opinion of having a thesis statement at the beginning where we have very clear defined goals that we're going to reach. And then the final thing I want to congratulate on is having very clear ethical lenses. I really, really like the mention of consequentialism and the moral obligation, and having that as a very, very defined and very upfront goal that we're going to be reaching, and how you can use that different perspective to really analyze the issue that you are coming to us as the board to help fix. So great job overall. I really enjoyed it, and I think you guys did a fantastic job.
And Fred?
Yeah, I got a few comments. Want to echo that. I think it's Oliver Wendell Holmes who said, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter about the distillation of your presentations. That I want to commend everybody. It seems like you really did a nice job of researching. You had a lot of ideas. And then as consultants or people who are trying to persuade others, really, I think that you have to distill the ideas down to their essence, and you have to make sure you give their, Ryan mentioned lawyers love to talk about that old guidance, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. There's another one that basically says that you want to give people something to grab onto and walk away with from a presentation, but they only have two hands. So you've got to distill it down to two things that they can walk away with, because, you know, in 10 minutes, I think that you did a great job of kind of conveying the depth of your research, but that came at the cost of so many ideas in such a short period of time that I was kind of left with, well, what do you want me to do exactly? And for me, I think an effective presentation, you know, is really clear on what you want somebody to walk away with. And so for me, what I'm always thinking about is, okay, what are the two things I want everybody to get from this talk? And that's what I want to make sure there's no uncertainty about what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's kind of the presentation thing. But secondly, I want to say thank you to everybody for just having an ethical lens. And I think that really our collective journey is for businesses to understand that good ethics is good business. And there's lots of examples of that. And I think that you're all trying to bring that home. But at the end of the day, I think that if you're trying to convince a corporate entity to take action, it's got to be presented through the lens of why it's in their interest. And I think that you were getting at those arguments, but that's the essence of what we have to wrestle with is, hey, you're on this board. The board is responsible for the company, and you've got to give me something to grab onto that I can justify changing what we're doing, because it's in our interest. And that might be our brand, it might be the optics, it might be trade-offs, it might be earnings, it might be mitigation, it might be reducing the probability of regulation, it could be anything. But you know, we got to have a reason to take action. And those are kind of the global comments. I just want to say that to me, I think sugar is a very big deal, very big deal. And I love that. I love that you see that. And for me, I think that you had me at sugar. You didn't need to get into the plastics, but
not surprising from the morning calisthenics guy.
Yeah.
And but I think that you know, that's a really good issue to pick up on. And I think that is a very important public health issue. I think the Ukraine and democracy are very complicated issues, and I really appreciated the people at West Point thinking about it from an iconoclastic way. You know, that there are civilians there and that they need to be in the equation. And it's easy to paint with a broad brush. And I really respected that you came at it from that point of view. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. And then train safety is on everybody's mind for lots of reasons. And I was just really want to tip my cap to you for a compelling list of just super strong argument of why thinking in a preemptive way is good for the company and good for society. And I wanted to just call out one last thing that Manitoba did that I thought was, and also Fordham did also, which was connecting the mission statements or the purpose statements with specific actions. And I think that's a really powerful way to think about it too. So like Ryan and Samantha, I want to laud you. It is inspiring. And that's why I like doing this, is that there's so much. It's so hard to be idealistic. It's so hard to do the right thing. It's so hard to bring the ethical lens. And we need to laud that and encourage it. And I want you to stick with it and bring that to your professional endeavors. So thank you.
Thank you. So we've got the power of 2 versus the power of 3, right? Based on the comments. I thought they were all very well done. Excellent research of your subject. You knew your subject matter beautifully. I have one comment for Fordham, and this is honestly the consequence of being on Zoom as opposed to in person. And please God, we'll all be in person next year up in Cambridge. But Melina, when you were speaking, there was a point where it was almost like a lightsaber of light next to you, because you've got a skylight, I believe, or a high window in back of you. You may want to, before your final presentation, check each other's, what are the optics like in terms of background? Because all of a sudden it was really funny. It was like the voice of God is coming down here as you were talking. This is the first time in a lot of years, I've been at this 21 years, where I actually emailed Professor White during your presentation, when you use the word consequentialism. In this competition, it's a huge no-no to use philosophical jargon. And I actually had to write to him and say, is that a disqualifier? And our conclusion was that you used the word once and therefore it was not. But really be careful about that if you come back next year, because I've watched a phenomenal team actually lose the competition for something comparable. But it was a one-time, and it wasn't, deontological thinking or anything of that consequence. So it didn't rise to the level, but it did come a little bit close. I got a little confused at the beginning of your presentation because you talked about the industry. And then we heard a lot about Nutella, which fascinated me because I am a chocoholic, okay? And there's so much for sugar, right, Fred? But I thought it might have been enhanced had you focused only on Nutella. I wasn't quite sure. Are we an industry council? Are we the board of directors of a company? And that I was listening very carefully for it because it was confusing. For West Point, I thought your topic was fantastic. And whenever you get into a subject that is geopolitical in nature, and I've seen this repeatedly with the service academies, because, this is what you do. This is what you're going to be doing in the service of our country. I thought it was extraordinary. It was a terrific subject. And I really liked your dichotomy between, the regime versus individuals who may actually be, disenfranchised by the regime or under threat, and how that helped you to reach the ethical conclusion for the company to remain in Russia. And as for Manitoba, another very interesting topic, the consequences of derailment on multiple levels for those who were injured, for the ethics of the company as a whole, for the community, for employees as stakeholders. I thought that was really excellent. And I have to say one last thing about the speed with which you spoke. And Garrison, you did speak very, very fast. I think 10 minutes is my favorite part of the competition. I used to think that it was the long competition because, of course, you've got several of us here who are lawyers, so we love the full panoply. but the 10-minute that focuses on ethics is really why we're here. I think the 90-second is very hard because most lawyers don't know how to say anything in 90 seconds. But as to the speed, I'm a native New Yorker, okay, other than 3 years in New Haven. So I'm thinking, you're not really talking that fast, to be honest with you. And we do know that there are a little bit of nerves involved and you don't want to be cut off and not get to make your closing. So I think I'm much more kind of accommodating to the rapid fire speech because it's kind of how we operate on this coast of the country. But seriously, congratulations to all of you. On the service academies, are you graduating and going into service now, or you have another year at the academy?
Yes, ma'am. We'll both be graduating in May.
Congratulations. And the rest of you, I think the Fordham team are first year B students, correct? Yes. And what about Manitoba? Yeah.
I'm
Also
a first year student and Garrison is second year.
Good luck in the job market, Garrison. And we wish you all every success, not only this afternoon, but in life. And for those, then you are in Tony Marco's graduating class, whose mom is a friend of mine, right? And who's going off to a fellowship next year. I have to say one more thing about West Point, because I've judged so long. I've judged the Navy and West Point repeatedly. And it always struck me that the West Point teams were very rigid, that they didn't show flexibility in their arguments as much, as opposed to Annapolis, which has a slightly different kind of educational format. And you guys, I see such a difference in the way that you presented versus 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that's a credit to your school and the change that I'm seeing educationally that's applicable to, to your educations. Good luck to everybody this afternoon, and we wish you a wonderful summer.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Take
ma'am.
care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.